Oftentimes, when people imagine Germany, images of half-timbers, Bavarian buildings, oversized beer mugs, lederhosen, and freshly baked pretzels come to mind. It may seem easy to oversimplify Germany's cultural identity, but the reality is, Germany's cities, regions, and states are far from identical. A perfect example of this, Cologne and Frankfurt. Both of these Western German cities are densely packed with distinctive cultures, architecture, and cityscapes. There are a lot of comparison videos out there, but I want to go beyond just the numbers and the tourist checklists. How do Cologne and Frankfurt stack up in the way they smell, the way the air feels, the ambience and the lore that creates the magic of the atmosphere, the sounds that fill your ears in the city streets, and, of course, the tastes that define each experience? We'll find out today in the latest installment of Comparing the Senses, Cologne versus Frankfurt. After the video, be sure to leave a comment on which of these two cities you feel has an experience that fits your persona more. I'm Michael, and this is A Sense of Travel. Let's dive in. So before we take on the senses, let's take a look at some very quick facts about each city, just in case you're not familiar with either one. Cologne sits in the northwest corner of Germany along the winding Rhine River in the state of North Rhine-Westphalia. Over 1 million people live here, and 3.1 million people live in the greater Cologne-Bonn metro area. Conversely, Frankfurt sits southeast of Cologne in the rolling green hills of the state of Hesse. Nearly 800,000 people call Frankfurt am Main home, and over 5.6 million people live in its metro area. So, the first thing to look at when stacking up Cologne and Frankfurt is perhaps the most obvious thing. Their cityscapes. So let's kick off in Cologne. Cologne is much larger than I realized it would be, but it still doesn't feel like a big city in the same way that Frankfurt does. The cityscape of Cologne is really defined by its contrasts. While there are some older structures in Cologne, such as the old medieval city gates and its 12 Romanesque cathedrals and churches, much of the city feels relatively new. There's still a distinctly European form, however. Cobbled streets, pedestrian-only promenades, large trees, street cafes, low-rise buildings, plant-adorned residential balconies, and bay windows abound, adorned in facades of pastel pinks, beige, gray, and slightly off-whites. While speaking of the contrast between old and new, there's one structure in particular that defines the skyline: the Cologne Cathedral. The tallest Gothic cathedral in the world and the third tallest overall, Cologne Cathedral towers over the city with its twin bell tower spires piercing the sky at 515 feet tall. From above, Cologne appears to be a quilt of gray, white, and brown. High-rises poke out from the sea of buildings with architecture that dates to the mid-20th century. The older structures that fill in the gaps are stone and plaster, with a dark, aged brown terracotta roofline. Church steeples with architectural styles varying by the centuries rise out of the low-rise sea of buildings, and the murky green Rhine River cascades on by. Cologne and Frankfurt cityscapes are similar right off the bat in that they are both cities of contrasts. The Second World War brought a great deal of destruction to the city in the first half of the 20th century, and it led to a modern makeover, for better or for worse. The sea of roofs in Frankfurt are primarily black tile with splashes of red clay terracotta. The modern, rather boxy high-rises mix in with the more traditional European low-rises in a patchwork of whites, creams, soft yellows, browns, and dark glass. So one of the first things I'm noticing about Frankfurt is just how clean it is. I mean, for a city this size, it is remarkably polished. There's no trash everywhere, but also it doesn't feel grungy or overcrowded. Like, everything seems like it's been freshly painted and kind of I don't know. There's just something shiny about Frankfurt. The towering, gleaming skyscrapers of the financial district may feel a bit sterile, but old half-timbered buildings and charming pubs still fill the streets, creating a blend of fun, traditional German, classically European, and stylishly modern. Surrounding the city, often to the countryside of Hesse, are low, rolling hills of hazy blue and deep, dark green, and the murky greenish-brown River Main winds right through the heart of town. Cologne's Old Town blends both quintessentially German and European sensations, with medieval churches, colorful, winding, tight cobbled streets, cobbled plazas and squares adorned in aged bronze statues and dining patios, and pedestrian promenades of shops, cafes, pubs, and museums. Rather large despite the city's modernization after the Second World War, Cologne's Old Town features several sub-districts. Altermarkt Square, for example, is a large cobblestoned plaza with far more colorful buildings than much of Cologne. Bright reds, yellows, and pinks adorn many of the aged plaster on the buildings surrounding the square, which sits at the base of the ornately designed, stone-spired Old City Hall. As is the case with many German public squares, Altermarkt is large enough to feel like a community space, but small enough to feel intimate and almost theme park-like. Heumarkt Square, adjacent to the Altermarkt, is an equally beautiful and colorful square, albeit far larger, with colorful pointed rooflines and views of the towering spires of the various cathedrals on the horizon. It's here that you really get that full breadth of just how much the aged spires resemble fairy tale castles. In comparison, Frankfurt's Old Town was also a bit ravaged by World War II, but in contrast to Cologne, a distinctively German plaza replicating the original heart of the Old Town was reconstructed. Enter Romer Square. Here you'll see beautiful, traditional German structures, namely half-timber houses, with colorful, smooth facades, dark woods, black terracotta roofs and steep triangular points, and Bavarian-style fonts on the signage. Now, two structures that do remain relatively unscathed from the war are Frankfurt's medieval churches. Old Nicholas Church, which sits on the square and dates to the 1400s, and the red stone Frankfurt Cathedral. Outside of Romer and across the River Main sits Frankfurt's Old Sachsenhausen neighborhood, a center for pub life and some of the city's best Apfelwein. The older center of the district has a classic medieval German feel to it, with tight cobbled streets, dark terracotta shingled roofs, German fonts on the street signs, and a lot of leftover beer bottles from the night before. By morning, it can feel like a ghost town, but there's some clear evidence of the previous night's fun. Perhaps you're noticing by now that while the city's overall color palettes differ quite a bit in regard to the overall cityscapes, this part of Germany shares a lot more in this realm, as indicated right here. When you see a picture or a video of a place, you try to imagine what it must feel like to actually be there. An important component of that is the way the air smells. Let's see how Cologne and Frankfurt stack up. Despite being invented here, Cologne, Germany does not in fact smell like Cologne. Unless, of course, your cologne smells like cigarette smoke, kebabs, and old stone. Of course, in addition to those non-perfumey scents, you'll get wafts of damp concrete from the modern buildings and fishy river water from the Rhine. If I were to create a candle that smelled just like Cologne, it would smell of smoke, kebab spice, damp stone, and fresh water. And a bit of a contrast to Cologne, Frankfurt is a very clean-smelling city. There's a lot of green space here, and the sense of earth, florals, and a woody musk fill the air as you wander the streets. Frankfurt's buildings may not be so old at this point, but lofts of damp stone and concrete still permeate the air, perhaps thanks to the moisture from the River Main. Now, something in Frankfurt that you won't get away from is the smell of fried pub foods and beer. As you imagine yourself walking through Romer Square or Frankfurt's urban neighborhoods, schnitzel, lager, baking pretzels, and a note of Apfelwein will fill your nostrils. All things considered, if I were to create a Frankfurt-scented candle, it would smell of lager, damp stone, river water, musk, and florals. German food is not a monolith. While sausage, pretzels, and beer may be the culinary staples that are most stereotypically associated with the country, German food is all that and much, much more. Despite their relatively close locations, both Cologne and Frankfurt add their own unique contributions to the menu. To compare the tastes of both cities, let's start in Cologne. Käsespätzle. At Frühe Gastronomie, one of the oldest restaurants in Cologne, you'll find Käsespätzle, a hearty dish that consists of thick, almost potato-like noodles doused in fresh Gouda cheese and crispy fried onions. Kartoffelklöße. At Dom im Stapelhaus, I tried a Cologne classic dish which consisted of homemade marinated beef with sweet and sour sauce, red cabbage, applesauce, and a unique form of potato, Kartoffelklöße. These potato dumplings have the consistency of a spongy bao bun, but taste like any other potato, which makes for an interesting and almost conflicting experience in your head. Doner kebab. Much of Germany's modern cuisine has been influenced by the Turks who migrated heavily to the country throughout the 1980s. Doner kebab is a localized dish that, while technically Turkish, is also very much German. Mine, from a shop called Istanbul Doner, was stuffed with spicy rotisserie chicken, purple cabbage, lettuce, and tzatziki sauce. Just like Cologne, Frankfurt has its own distinctive culinary palette to bring to the overall taste of Germany. Here's how Frankfurt's signature tastes stack up to Cologne. Apfelwein and Händekäse. At Apfelwein Wirtschaft Stroop Peter, one day I'll get that right, I tried a Frankfurt alcoholic favorite. Apfelwein is crisp and tart with a clear apple taste, but it has the same dryness as red wine. Händekäse, on the other hand, is an interesting Frankfurt staple that traditionally pairs with the Apfelwein. Served alongside brown bread and butter, Händekäse consists of sour milk cheese, onions, raspberry olive vinaigrette, and olives. Frankfurter Kranz. A Frankfurter Kranz is a delicious local dessert comprising of cake layered with cream cheese and raspberry and coated in chopped nuts. Perfect alongside a cup of coffee, I had mine at Café Wacker near the Stadel Museum. Grüne Soße. This Frankfurt staple tastes like the color green. Herbal, leafy, and chunky, and super refreshing, this sauce can accompany almost anything in the Frankfurt cuisine. In my case, I tried it on a delicious Frankfurt schnitzel right in the heart of Romer Square. Now, as you can see, there's no clear winner on the tastes here, and it's entirely subjective. This is also not even close to a comprehensive list of the defining tastes of each city. The soundscape of Cologne is almost exactly what you'd expect in a mid-sized urban European city. Heavy church bells from the dozens of churches throughout the city ringed into the hazy air on the hour, joining the sound of whistling wind. The sounds of cars on pavement, bike gears shifting as cyclists zoom by, and screeching trains from the central train station right next to the Cologne Cathedral join the soundscape to create a quintessentially urban European feel. Despite being roughly the same size as Cologne, Frankfurt is surprisingly peaceful. Yes, you'll still hear the sounds of construction noises and auto traffic as you wander the colorful streets, but they don't drown out the more quaint and serene soundscape of chirping birds, screeching tram lines, heavy bell chimes, and street musicians playing the accordion. In the heart of Frankfurt's old center, crowds of pedestrians in an almost festival-like atmosphere fill the central promenade while the old Romer Square echoes with cutlery clattering, chattering diners, and luggage cluttering over the cobbled stones. Now, Cologne is one of, if not the, cloudiest cities in all of Europe, but on the bright side, it's also one of the warmest. Cologne has what's called an oceanic temperate climate, so it really doesn't get as hot or humid as a lot of the rest of the world. Just like Cologne, Frankfurt also has an oceanic temperate climate, and so the weather isn't all that different. Most often it'll be a bit chilly and occasionally warm here. And thankfully, despite a lot of rain, it isn't incredibly humid. So what do I mean when I talk about the comparison of the ambience and the lore of each city? Well, for starters, I'm a strong proponent of the idea that to capture the spirit and the magic of places around the world, you have to let your imagination run a bit wild. After all, it's urban legends and mythological fairy tales, and dramatized history that play such a big part of the identity in cities and countries worldwide. Letting fantasy and folklore infiltrate your mind as you wander about can really bring out the mystique and charm in different places. It's strange because, for as much as I mentioned Cologne being a bit shiny and modern and quintessentially mid-sized European, it still has an ambience of old, medieval holiness. The 12 Romanesque cathedrals and, of course, the city's centerpiece, the Cologne Cathedral, have such a dominating impact on the vibe of the city. What's even stranger is that the holiness almost feels countercultural. Cologne has more pubs per capita than any other city in Germany, and Kolsch is a huge deal here. With the old streets winding in the old town, fairy tale-like spires rising above the more modern structures, and the classically German signage hanging above the beer halls and pubs, Cologne feels like a medieval church city that's time-traveled to the 21st century. You get that tangible sense that while you're in a Cologne that has embraced the tech and lifestyle of today's world, it never really fully let go of its medieval, riverside German roots, and I love that. In many parts of Frankfurt, you feel like you've stepped back in time to a classic, majestic, medieval Germany with a stern hand, but a twinkle in its eye. Frankfurt, especially in places like Romer Square and Old Sachsenhausen, has all of the regality of old Germany, like half-timber architecture, foreboding religious statues, and a strong sense of religious authority, like in Cologne. But it also has that underlying feeling of what's bubbling underneath, found in its beer halls and pubs and wine and beer festivals and its warm breweries. The streets of Frankfurt are often relatively quiet by day and full of life by night, at least until it's bedtime. And some people might find that part dull, but I personally find some magic in it. There's a genuine feeling in the air that just feels quintessentially German. The idea here isn't to pit these cities up against each other. In fact, the idea is to celebrate the fact that there's so much world to discover, experience, and explore, even in the same country, even within the same region of the same country. Thanks for diving into the German cities of Cologne and Frankfurt with me today, and stay tuned for more city comparisons in the near future. As always, thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.